Welcome back to the other side of the cell. I would like to thank everybody for supporting this channel. I know a lot of you guys have given me a lot of ideas about podcasts, about doing some collabs with other people. I do have, a couple collabs in the works, and we're trying to work out details and scheduling and all that. I appreciate the support, and if you like what I'm doing, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell for new videos as they come out. But today, a subject I was thinking about today was, I remember back in the day whenever I worked on what we called a behavior unit, and there was a correctional officer, and there was an inmate who claimed to be a boxer, tough guy boxer. So I was thinking about this story and it made me laugh, and I thought I would share it with you all because it is not only it's funny, serious, it's got a mix of a lot of things. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I'm gonna do a video on this and share it with you guys. So in this instance, we're back at that time in my career, I worked as a counselor on a behavior unit. And a behavior unit was where we put all of our problem inmates who were either violent, disruptive, and hard to manage inmates, and they kind of put them in the same pod just because of it just made more sense for control that way. And the pod was an 80 man, usually it was from 77 to 80 men on that pod. And it was a celled pod with double cells and single cells. So if you walked in, there was a control room out front, and then you walk through a sally port. And if you looked out, you had two tiers. In the bottom tier, you had single cells on the right. Coming around on the other side, there were double cells. And then on the top tier, they were all
using force if necessary.
So,
his finger is not broken, but resisting causes pain. The prisoner now has time to calm down.
And it's there's not many. The ratio is like 80-20, 80% white, 20% black, inmate-wise population. So we got a guy in. He was a short little black guy. He was probably 5'7", 5'8", maybe 140, 150 pounds. And he claimed to be a boxer. And we'll just call him Fred. Fred used to always walk around shadow boxing, doing all this kind of stuff all the time. And he was a character. And he didn't talk much, but all he did was walk around on the pod, shadow boxing, doing running in place and doing all that kind of calisthenics, just to kind of send a message to the other inmates that I can fight, so don't mess with me because I'm a boxer, blase blase. So and in the prison that I worked, there's a lot of people that are just down home, soul of the earth kind of people. A lot of them used to be coal miners and worked in lumber yards and everything like that. So they're big, strong men, and they are just, good people, strong people, hardworking people. So whenever you're an inmate and you live on your dorm or your pod or whatever, you look at shift change, and every time the shifts change, you see the officers, you get used to the officers. Which officers are going to be lenient, which officers are going to be by the book, and which officers you just don't get along with, whatever. So Fred and this particular officer, we'll call him Donk. He's a big man, probably 6'1", probably 250-ish. Very big, strong man. But he played as an officer. He was just by the book. Whatever I'm around, you do what you're supposed to do. You don't break the rules, because if you break the rules, I'm gonna deal with you. So this particular afternoon, it was a, a yard call. So when they do yard calls, they have 5 minutes to get to the call. They make the call over the intercom, over the box, and then the guys get ready. They got 5 minutes to prepare, and then they kick the doors, and the doors open. They get to go down, and they have to go off our unit down the stairs and out to the yard. So that's pretty much the setup. So this particular day, it was a shift change. That time they worked 8-hour shifts. It was 6 to 2, 2 to 10, and 10 to 6 shifts. So this was the afternoon shift, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So they just changed shifts, and they just called the yard. So the guys were getting ready to go to the yard, and anytime they went to the yard, they weren't allowed to take anything with them uh, off the unit down to the yard. So they wasn't allowed to take anything that like in bags or anything like that, or any kind of drinks or anything like that, just because so many issues happen out in the yard. So this particular day, Fred, I don't know if he was testing the waters or he's just trying to see if he could bully somebody, but he had a bag. The inmates get these mesh bags where they put their laundry and stuff. Well, he had put some stuff in there, a towel and different things, but things he wasn't allowed to take off the unit. So whenever they released him to go to the yard, the officer steps out and says, "Hey, you can't take nothing to your yard." And he said, and then Fred said, "What's up with that, man? I'm going to the yard to work out. I need to take a towel and stuff with me." And they're like, and the officer's like, "No, that's not allowed. You know better. Go take it back." But anyway, Fred decided to challenge him and get up in his face and say, "Hey, man, I'm taking this to your yard. You know, blase, blase. I'm gonna do what I want to do, basically." And the officer engages in him, engages at him really quickly and sternly says, "Hey, I've already told you you're not taking nothing to your yard. Either turn around, take the stuff back to your yard, and we're going to have a problem today." So Fred escalates it more because there's like, 5, 10 guys and they're all going to the yard, but they're stopping now to look and see what's going on. The officer says, "If you guys want to go to the yard, get going. You hit the wall." So he makes Fred go over and stand by the wall, and because he's going to deal with him trying to take contraband to the yard. During this process, Fred throws the bag at him and kind of throws it and hits him in the chest. Well, that didn't go well. So then the officer says, "Get up against the wall, put your hands against the wall, we're going to cuff you." So Fred, in his infinite wisdom, turns to put his hands on the wall and then says, "No, I'm not doing that." And starts walking back on the pod. But during this time, the sally port doors are open because these guys are going to the yard. So Fred managed to weasel his way back into the pod, and the officer has to let that clear before he can go in and engage and deal with him. So you got the yard call going out, and then you have this situation. So the officer immediately follows him back out onto the pod. Fred turns around. He's probably 5, 6 feet away from him. He says, "Man, you want to do something about it? Come hit my cell. We'll finish this. We'll deal with this as men, dog." So, for whatever reason, he had known how Donk was as far as an officer. He wasn't afraid. He's a big man, and you're not going to intimidate him. So why are you talking shit to him? I don't know what was going through his head, but whatever was going through his head was not the right thing that should have been going through his head. So Fred, who lived down on the left side, almost to the end, is talking shit to the officer all the way down, right? So he's talking shit, and then all the other inmates were like, amping him up, So, "Yeah, go in there, hit the cell, hit the cell." So Fred goes back into the cell, and he leaves the door open. He's going, "Yeah, come in and get me, motherfucker, come in and get me." So obviously, The officer says, okay, I'm going to get him. Should he have done that? Maybe not, but he did anyway. So he marches right down in between inmates. The inmates kind of, fan out and they get out of his way. He walks down to where Fred's cell is, and he stands in the door and says, "You need to come out here because I'm gonna cuff you up. You're going out front. We're gonna take you to get you chilled out a little bit." He's like, "Fuck you, man. Come on in the cell. Do something, dog. Come on in. Come on in." So, in the infinite wisdom of this guy, thinking that he's going to intimidate the officer, thinking that he's going to make a show for all those guys out in the day room, the officer engages him, goes right back to the back of the cell, snatches him up, spins him around, and picks him up by his collar of his shirt. What he didn't realize was Donk is like super strong. He's just a big man, and he's just a big old fella, and he doesn't take nothing from nobody. So Donk goes in, snatches him up, picks him up by the back collar of his shirt. He's got this guy up so high that his tippy toes are barely touching the floor. And he's basically hovercrafted him all the way out of his cell, up the day room, into the sally port, out of the sally port, out to the other side of the control room. Gets him out there, puts him on the wall, handcuffs him, about dislocates his arm because he's just so strong. When he puts his hands in the handcuffs, the guy's like, "Oh God, oh man, you hurt me, you hurt." And he's not really hurting him. He's just putting him in and making sure he's secure. Handcuffs him, and then they escort him down to segregation. And once they get him down to segregation, and he's marching him out that whole way down because he had to go down a flight of steps, down a couple hallways and around to get to segregation. The whole time this is happening, when you go down into the hallway, the yard is in the center of the facility, so the inmates can look through the doors and they're laughing and clowning him and calling him all kinds of names, and he's getting marched all the way down and around, and the whole population sees this, and basically he makes a fool of himself. He is humiliated. He gets basically punked out by the officer. He looks like a fool, and he gained 0 from that. He gets locked up for threats. He does 60 days in the hole for threatening the officer, threatening to strike the officer, do all those threats. He does 60 days in the hole. When he gets out and is done with his whole time, he gets released, and they place him right back up on that unit. And when he comes back after the 60 days, his level of respect went from here down to here, which you can't even hardly see it, because number one, he made the mistake of being he blustered too much, and then he didn't back it up. And living in that culture, if you're going to do that, if you're going to talk shit to an officer, if you're going to be that guy, then you got to follow through. The minute that he chose to engage an officer like that and dare him into a cell, he had to fight him. There's no other way around it. If you're an inmate and you challenge an officer and you do all that, if you don't follow through, then you become a punk. And you become somebody that they don't respect. Nobody's going to respect you if you challenge an officer that way and you don't swing on him. You backed yourself into that corner. You wrote that check and your ass couldn't cash it. Now you look like a fool and you're weak and you're perceived to be weak. So the rest of the time that he was incarcerated, he basically got no respect from nobody because everybody, staff and inmates, knew that you talked a lot, but you wasn't going to do nothing. And then that caused him to get in a few fights while he was there. And he lost all of his fights. Everybody figured out that he wasn't this master boxer. He talked about all these fights that he fought and how bad he was, but in the end, everybody found out that he was weak, and that was all an act. And when you come to prison, a lot of guys think they can fight. A lot of guys think they're tough, but there's a difference between fighting in prison, fighting down the street, and different things like that. Because when you're fighting in prison, sometimes you're fighting for your life, and there is no bell that rings, and there's no tapping out, and there's no submissions and all that stuff. A lot of times when you're fighting, you're lucky if you get a one-on-one. If you get a one-on-one, count yourself lucky, because usually it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-on-1 or whatever, and you're getting beat down, and a lot of times you're getting life flighted to the next medical center. But he got lucky that it didn't come down to it, because he probably lost, and he probably lost bad if he'd have jumped on that officer, because that officer he was just one not to fool with. And a lot of these guys come into prison, they have this bravado, and they have a lot of false narratives that they try to play out, and stuff that they think. It's kind of like Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence in the movie Life, when they talk all this smack. Eddie Murphy talks about the guy at the cornbread, and he said, "You motherfucker, take my cornbread," and that big guy picks him up and throws him all over the place. Remember that movie? Go back and check that movie out. That's what I'm talking about. You don't ever come into prison like that. And this is one of those scenarios where a guy, he thought he was bad. He thought he was the, big dog, whatever. He got fooled. He got punked out. The officer did his job, and all was well, and everybody went home. But, my advice for any of those young guys out here doing stupid stuff and all that kind of stuff is don't come to prison, because a lot of you guys are not built for it. You'll never make it. You'll be prey, and you'll be a victim. Believe that. You're not built for it. And the best thing I can tell you is just always stay on the other side.